Late at night, in quiet rooms lit only by a phone screen, strangers start to feel familiar. A name, a voice, a promise of something more. Messages turn into meetings. Trust forms fast, but somewhere between the digital world and real life, something goes wrong. What starts as a connection drifts into silence and questions that never fade. Let's uncover 5 women who met someone online and vanished. Story 1. On a warm December evening in Auckland, the city buzzed with travelers, lights, and late-night conversations. Among them was a young woman celebrating her birthday far from home. She had just finished dinner, sent messages to loved ones, and stepped into the night to meet someone new, someone she had connected with online. Within hours, she would disappear, leaving behind only unanswered messages, surveillance footage, and a trail that would haunt an entire nation. Grace Millane was 21 years old, from Wickford, Essex, in the United Kingdom. She had recently graduated with a degree in advertising and marketing and decided to spend a year traveling before beginning her career. Friends and family described her as outgoing, kind, and adventurous, someone who embraced new experiences and people. Grace was close with her parents and stayed in constant contact during her travels. She shared photos, updates, and plans almost daily. Her journey had already taken her through South America before she arrived in New Zealand, where she planned to explore for several weeks. Traveling solo didn't worry her family. Grace was confident, responsible, and excited about the independence that came with seeing the world on her own. On December 1st, 2018, her 22nd birthday, Grace spent the evening in central Auckland. That night, she arranged to meet a man she had connected with through Tinder, a dating app she had used occasionally during her travels. Security cameras later showed the pair walking through the city together, visiting bars, and eventually entering a hotel on Queen Street. It was the last confirmed sighting of Grace alive. The next day, her parents attempted to contact her to wish her a happy birthday. When their messages went unanswered, concern began to grow. By the 3rd day of silence, they contacted New Zealand police. Hotel staff confirmed that Grace had never returned to her room that night. At first, authorities treated her disappearance as a missing persons case, but as investigators reviewed CCTV footage and digital records, the situation quickly escalated. Police began tracing Grace's final movements, focusing on the man she had met through Tinder. Surveillance footage showed him returning to the hotel alone. His behavior afterward raised immediate concern. Authorities launched an extensive search, reviewing vehicle movements and cell phone data. Days later, Grace's body was discovered in a remote, forested area outside Auckland. Investigators determined that her death was not accidental. Evidence revealed attempts to conceal what had happened, including internet searches and movements inconsistent with panic or confusion. During trial proceedings, prosecutors presented a detailed timeline that contradicted claims of an accident. The defense argued that her death occurred during a consensual encounter, but the jury rejected this explanation. The verdict confirmed what investigators had concluded. Grace had been deliberately killed. The news devastated Grace's family. Her parents traveled to New Zealand, where they faced unimaginable grief far from home. Vigils were held across the country, and thousands gathered to honor her life. New Zealand's Prime Minister issued a public apology, stating that Grace should have been safe. In the years following her death, Grace's family created the Love Grace charity, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and raising awareness about safety and respect. Through this work, they chose to transform loss into purpose. Despite legal closure, the emotional wounds never healed. Grace's parents have spoken openly about the pain of knowing her final moments were spent with someone she trusted, someone she had met online, believing she was safe. What if she had never accepted that invitation to meet? And what if one decision, one moment, had changed everything? Story 2. On a warm afternoon in June 2017, a young woman waited alone at a bus stop on a quiet university campus in Illinois. She had an appointment to attend and a future carefully planned ahead of her. Nearby, students walked between buildings, cars passed by, and life moved on as usual. Within minutes, she would step into a stranger's car, a decision influenced by trust, circumstance, and a brief interaction that would change everything. She was never seen again. Yingying Zhang was 26 years old, born in Nanping, Fujian Province, China. She was a gifted academic who graduated at the top of her class from Sun Yat-sen University and later earned a master's degree from Peking University. Intelligent, ambitious, and deeply family-oriented, Yingying dreamed of becoming a professor. In April 2017, she arrived in the United States as a visiting scholar at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. She was conducting research in environmental sciences and was considering applying for a PhD program. She had plans to return home later that year and marry her longtime boyfriend. Friends described her as cautious, polite, and focused on her studies. She had only been in the U.S. for a few weeks when she vanished. On June 9, 2017, Yingying left her apartment to sign a lease for new housing. She took a bus, but missed her transfer and attempted to catch another. Surveillance footage shows her standing alone at a bus stop near campus shortly after 2 p.m. A black sedan approached her. The driver spoke to her briefly. After a short exchange, she entered the vehicle. What Yingying did not know was that the man behind the wheel had been active on dating apps and had previously attempted to approach other women that same day. Investigators later revealed that he had used social platforms and fabricated stories to gain trust, presenting himself as safe and authoritative. This interaction, brief, ordinary, and unremarkable on the surface, would be the last confirmed sighting of Yingying Zhang. When she failed to show up for her appointment, concern grew. By that evening, her friends contacted the police. A missing person report was filed, and surveillance footage quickly became central to the investigation. Police traced the vehicle seen on camera to a former graduate student living nearby. Investigators learned that he had posed as a police officer to gain Yingying's trust, a tactic consistent with behavior seen in online predatory interactions. Digital evidence revealed his activity on dating and fetish-based websites where he had expressed interest in coercion and control. Phone records, surveillance footage, and witness statements steadily closed in around him. He was arrested weeks later and charged with kidnapping resulting in death. Recordings later revealed that he had lured Yingying under false pretenses after encountering her while driving through the area. Despite extensive searches, her remains were never recovered. Yingying's family traveled from China to the United States, holding on to hope that she might still be alive. They waited through weeks of searching, court hearings, and unanswered questions. When the truth emerged, it shattered them. Her parents later established a memorial garden near the site where she was last seen. They also created a foundation in her name to support international students facing emergencies abroad. Even years later, her family continues to speak of her with love and pride, not as a victim, but as a brilliant young woman whose life was stolen far too soon. What if she had never accepted that ride from a stranger she barely knew? And what if the trust we place in others online carries risks we still don't fully understand? Story 3. On a summer morning in 2017, a quiet car park in Chatham, England, became the setting for a tragedy that would shock an entire nation. The area was busy, ordinary, a place people passed through without a second thought. But that morning, a young woman's life ended violently, only weeks after she tried to leave a relationship that had begun online. What followed would raise urgent questions about dating apps, digital stalking, and how quickly obsession can turn deadly. Molly McLAREN was 23 years old, from Cobham in Kent. internet, she was described as kind, creative, and deeply compassionate. Molly struggled with an eating disorder and openly shared her recovery journey online in hopes of helping others feel less alone. She loved music, fitness, and spending time with friends. Those closest to her said she was thoughtful, intelligent, and full of empathy, someone who always tried to see the best in people. In 2016, Molly met Joshua Stimpson through the dating app Tinder. The two began talking online before meeting in person, eventually entering a relationship that lasted several months. At first, everything seemed normal. As the relationship progressed, friends noticed changes. Stimpson became increasingly controlling and emotionally volatile. Molly began to feel uneasy and eventually decided to end the relationship. After the breakup, his behavior escalated. He sent her repeated messages, posted false accusations about her on social media, and tracked her movements online. Despite blocking him on multiple platforms, he continued to monitor her through other people's accounts. Molly reported his behavior to the police. She told friends she was frightened and felt constantly watched. Text messages later revealed her fear had grown severe. On June 29th, 2017, Molly went to the gym at the Dockside Outlet Center in Chatham. After finishing her workout, she returned to her car in the parking lot. Unbeknownst to her, Stimpson had followed her there. Moments later, witnesses saw him approach her vehicle. Within minutes, the attack occurred. Molly was fatally wounded before help could arrive. Police arrived to find Molly critically injured. Despite emergency efforts, she could not be saved. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts quickly identified Stimpson as the attacker. Investigators uncovered a disturbing pattern of stalking behavior in the weeks leading up to her death. He had monitored her online activity, tracked her location, and even used another person's social media account to keep tabs on her after she blocked him. During trial, prosecutors argued that the attack was planned and driven by revenge. After Molly ended the relationship, the jury agreed. Stimpson was convicted of murder in 2018 and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 26 years before parole. Molly's death devastated her family and friends. Her parents described her as their light, someone who brought warmth into every room. In her memory, they created the Molly McLAREN Foundation, dedicated to supporting people suffering from eating disorders and raising awareness about online stalking and coercive control. Each year, loved ones held Molly Fest, a music event celebrating her life and raising funds for mental health support. The foundation later concluded its work after helping dozens of young people access therapy. Her family has continued to speak publicly about the dangers of digital stalking and the need to take warning signs seriously. What if the warning signs of online stalking had been taken more seriously sooner? And how many people today still underestimate the danger of someone they once trusted online? Story 4. On a warm July night in upstate New York, a teenage girl's life came to a sudden and tragic end, not in secrecy, but in a way the internet would never forget. What began as a casual online connection spiraled into one of the most disturbing crimes of the digital age. Within hours, images spread faster than facts, and a family's grief became a public spectacle. But behind the headlines was a young woman who had simply trusted the wrong person. Bianca Michelle Devins was 17 years old, living in Utica, New York. She was creative, artistic, and deeply connected to online communities, where she shared her interests in gaming, music, and mental health awareness. Bianca struggled with anxiety and depression, something she spoke about openly. Friends described her as compassionate, thoughtful, and eager to help others feel less alone. She had recently graduated from high school and planned to study psychology, hoping to support others facing similar struggles. In early 2019, Bianca met Brandon Clark through Instagram, where the two began talking regularly. Their connection grew online, and eventually they met in person. While Clark believed the relationship was romantic, Bianca viewed him as a friend, a difference in perception that would later become significant. In July 2019, Bianca and Clark attended a concert together in New York City. Friends later said she believed they were spending time as friends, not as a couple. After the show, the two returned to Utica. That night, an argument occurred, reportedly after Clark became upset over Bianca showing interest in another person. In the early hours of July 14th, Bianca was killed. What followed shocked investigators and the public alike. Clark used social media and messaging platforms to post images of the crime, sending them to online communities and individuals. Police were alerted after users began reporting the posts. Officers arrived at the scene later that morning and took Clark into custody. Bianca was just 17 years old. Authorities quickly determined that the crime had been deliberate. Investigators found evidence that Clark had planned the attack and had researched methods beforehand. He later admitted responsibility and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. During sentencing, prosecutors described the killing as calculated and driven by jealousy and control. While the legal outcome was clear, the case raised broader questions about digital culture. How much responsibility do social platforms bear when violent content spreads unchecked? How can stalking continue even after someone blocks an individual? The role of online spaces, where obsession, anonymity, and instant access intersect, became a central focus of the case. Bianca's family endured unimaginable trauma. Her younger sister spoke publicly about the lasting psychological impact, including harassment from strangers who continued sending her the images posted online. Her mother fought tirelessly for accountability, not only in court, but from social media companies whose platforms allowed the images to spread. The family advocated for legislation to prevent similar content from circulating in the future. In Bianca's memory, a scholarship fund was created for students pursuing psychology. Vigils, art shows, and memorials honored her life. Not the way it ended, but the kindness she showed while living. Her family emphasized one message above all: Bianca was more than the crime that took her life. What if the warning signs of digital obsession had been taken more seriously? And how many young people today are still unaware of how quickly an online connection can turn dangerous? Story 5. On a quiet November evening in 2017, a young woman in Lincoln, Nebraska, prepared for a date she'd arranged online. She smiled for a photo, posted it to social media, and walked out the door, believing she would return later that night. The town was calm. The roads were quiet. Nothing about the moment suggested that this ordinary evening would become the beginning of a mystery that would shock the nation. Sydney Irene LOOFE was 24 years old. Born on August 21, 1993, she was raised in Nebraska and was close to her family, especially her mother. Friends described her as kind, gentle, and creative. She enjoyed fishing, music, and spending time with people she trusted. Sydney worked at a Menards store in Lincoln and had recently been dealing with anxiety and depression. Despite her struggles, she remained hopeful and open to new beginnings. Like many people her age, she had begun using dating apps as a way to meet others. She was cautious, asked questions, and often kept friends informed of her plans. On November 15, 2017, Sydney arranged a second date with a woman she had met on Tinder, who went by the name Audrey. Before leaving, Sydney sent messages to friends and posted a Snapchat photo with the caption, "Ready for my date." That evening, her phone last pinged in the town of Wilbur, Nebraska. After that, all communication stopped. The next day, Sydney failed to show up for work. Her phone went unanswered. Her family discovered her car still parked at her apartment, along with her purse and personal belongings. Even her cat had been left unattended, something completely out of character for her. Concern quickly turned into alarm, and a missing person report was filed. Police soon learned that Sydney's last known contact was through the Tinder account she had used to arrange the date. A friend helped investigators identify the account, which led them to Bailey Boswell and her partner Aubrey Trail. Cell phone data placed the pair in the same area as Sydney on the night she vanished. Surveillance footage showed them purchasing items such as cleaning supplies and tools shortly before her disappearance. 3 weeks later, investigators discovered Sydney's remains along a rural road nearly 60 miles away. Authorities concluded that the meeting had been planned and that the suspects had attempted to conceal their actions afterward. While the exact sequence of events was debated during the trial, evidence showed that Sydney had been lured under false pretenses through a dating app. Trail was later sentenced to death. Boswell received life in prison. Sydney's family was devastated. Vigils were held, and her story drew national attention. Her loved ones described her as a young woman who trusted too easily and believed in the good in others. A memorial was created in her honor, and advocacy groups used her case to raise awareness about online safety and dating app risks. Though justice was served in court, the absence of Sydney remains permanent. Her family has spoken publicly about the pain of never seeing her walk through the door again and the fear that other young people might unknowingly walk into similar danger. What if that date had been canceled, delayed, or never accepted at all? What if one small decision had changed the course of an entire life? They logged on, looking for a connection, a conversation, a moment of trust. Instead, their paths crossed with silence, uncertainty, and questions that still linger. Their stories remind us how quickly ordinary moments can turn into lasting mysteries, and how fragile safety can be in a digital world. This is Vanished Stories, where the missing are never forgotten.